Many of the early founding families of St. Demetrius came from the cathedral. We came from Cambridge. My mother grew up there. She was married in the Cambridge church. I was baptized there. Cambridge was different from the cathedral in that there was a large Greek presence in Cambridge. They all went to high school together, to church together, sang in the choir together. They were a very, very tight-knit family.
St. Constantine and Helen.
St. Constantine and Helen, I'm sorry.
Yes. No, it's fine, yes.
So my parents, who were American born, wanted me to have a Greek Orthodox identity. So they really went above and beyond. They went back and forth for Sunday school, for junior choir practice, for junior Goya, for cheerleader. I was a cheerleader for the church basketball team.
Oh my goodness.
It was exhausting.
Were the yells in Greek?
No. No, but there was a strong Greek presence in the church,
yes,
which was hard for me because I didn't really have that Greek background. Second generation, you stop speaking Greek at home. There were a small group of people who decided there should be a new church, which was pretty daring because there wasn't a Greek population in Newton, Wellesley, Weston. So that was different from the other church communities. I mean, there were Greeks, but not
right,
a big presence. They got the telephone books. So they got hold of the Newton telephone book, and they went through the Newton telephone book looking for Greek names.
Oh,
So
right.
Panagopoulos, you think maybe
Sticks
that's a
out,
Greek
yes,
name.
Absolutely.
So my parents came home and they said they want to build a church here in Newton. And so they were in, they were going to participate. So that was the beginning.
But then we had to name it.
Ah.
Yes, can we talk about the naming?
I wasn't there that night.
Oh my.
I stayed home and did homework.
Oh.
It was a Sunday night. But that was a free-for-all. My parents were there. Everybody talks about it. It was the Wild West. You had to pay for your vote.
Absolutely.
And there was a battle going on between someone wanted Hagia Sophia.
Yes.
And there were quite a few Dimitri.
Yes, that's exactly what Dan said, yes.
So it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it was kind of even Steven. And they were making money. The longer it went on, the more money they were making.
Yeah.
And then finally somebody, and I've forgotten his name, threw down an extra $1,000 and said, this is it. We're going to put an end to it. It's going to be St. Demetrius. So we begin. And in the beginning, we never knew who the priest was going to be. We didn't have a priest. It was a different priest every week. Nobody knew anybody. So we invented coffee hour. We were the first church to ever have coffee hour because we didn't know each other. So everybody went downstairs, had a cup of coffee, and got to know each other. It's one of my strongest memories of the early years of the church. I remember that they had an icon screen, obviously with the icons, but it was a plywood icon screen, and every inch was covered with flowers. And what I remember was the scent of the gardenias. It was magnificent. This church never did things in a small way. They were always over the top with whatever they could do for their church. I went, as the 60th anniversary was coming up, I started talking to the old-timers.
Yes.
No one else remembered this. I was horrified. Finally, John Anton said, yes, I know you're right because my uncle built that plywood wall. Mm. So that was correct. But Helen Makris, who was a founder, she and George Makris were founders of the church. Helen Makers tells the story. She was about to give birth to her second or third child, right at that time. And her husband, George, went down to Connecticut. There was a church in Connecticut that was buying a new icon screen, and they were gifting their old icon screen to us. And so it must have been Friday night. George drove all the way down to Connecticut with a few of the other men, drove all the way back, and there were people at the church waiting. And I think in the middle of the night or early morning hours, they put that icon screen up.
Unbelievable.
So finally, just last Sunday when I was talking to her, it clicked. What I was remembering was Good Friday. Flowers, epitafio.
Yes.
The icon screen came in for the first Easter.
Resurrection.
In those 24 hours, they pulled it in and put it up. Can you imagine the commitment? They wanted it there. And they literally stayed up all night, I'm sure. Just a wonderful story.
Great story.
Of their commitment to the church. The Azure Ball, very early on, became a tradition.
Why Azure? Where did that come from?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was held at the country club just down the street from the church, Woodland Country Club.
Woodland Country Club, yes.
We were there recently for the golf tournament, and I said to Father Cremidis, this is where they used to have the Azure Ball. And he said, no, it's too small. And I said, we were small.
Yes, exactly,
we were small. They all fit into that tiny facility. There was a raffle. This is the fun part. There was a raffle. They were raffling off a Cadillac.
Oh.
Which in the early 1960s was the car.
Absolutely.
This was a huge, huge pink Cadillac with enormous tail fins. And the tickets were $100 a piece.
Ooh, at that time.
Which in 1960 was a big amount of money.
Yes.
My Uncle Peter bought a ticket, Peter Georgantis.
Yes.
And I was just talking to my cousin Louie, and he said they were at home on Saturday night. They get a telephone call, and they said, we're at the Azure Ball. You just won the Cadillac.
Uncle George?
Uncle Peter.
Uncle Peter won the Cadillac? Georgantis. He won the Cadillac.
He won the Cadillac, and for years, every family event, there was that pink Cadillac. But it was wonderful. Again, larger than life, dramatic. That's the style of this church. There were about 20 of us to start with. We would meet in the church hall for Goya meetings.
Friday nights.
Friday nights. I remember we went on a skiing trip.
Yes.
And that was great fun. I learned to snowplow. I was not a skier. We went to the beach, and I have pictures of that beach party.
Oh, excellent.
We had, the boys made a pyramid. So there would be 3 on the bottom, 2 boys on top, and then I have a picture of Cindy on the very top and of myself on the very top of those pyramids at the beach. In the beginning we had Sunday school, and some seminarians would come in and teach.
Right.
But after a while, it wasn't very reliable. The older children didn't always show up. The seminarians didn't always show up. So I joined the choir. Professor Savas, Professor Jim Savas, who taught at Framingham State, was the choir director. And his family showed up to support him. I think he had 3 sisters and a niece that played the organ.
Wonderful. There you go.
So that was the backbone of the choir. George Tremus, Cindy's father, Cindy and Joanne's father, was in the choir. Jim Kritzis joined when I joined. So I
Do you still sing in the choir?
No, I don't have a particularly good voice. And it wasn't easy to get by Mr. Savas. I had to study,
I see.
Be an understudy for quite a few months before he allowed me to join. Today, the Kondakis family is the backbone of the choir. And there are quite a few Kondakis members in the choir. The trio Bel Canto
Yes.
had just put out a record of Greek ballads, and one of them was titled Sing Along with the Trio Bel Canto.
Okay.
They had, in the record jackets, they had all the lyrics printed out in Greek and then in anglicized Greek.
Right.
And the whole church community sat there and sang along with the
Are we
Trio Bel
talking
Canto.
Newton Lower Falls now?
Newton Lower Falls.
No kidding. That's enough.
I have focused on Newton Lower Falls.
Unbelievable.
And in fact, there isn't that much. That we have a wonderful Greek school today,
Yes.
but there aren't that many community Greek-speaking events like the ballads. I think we have a large non-Greek presence in this church.
Yes.
And so it no longer works. But in those days, we identified as Greek, and it was just wonderful. I told you we had a different priest every week, and finally they assigned Father Bougoudas.
Right.
He was only a few years older than we were. He was a new graduate, newly ordained, and we bonded. We had never had a priest more or less our age.
Exactly.
American-born, kind of somebody we could really relate to. He taught Greek school on Saturday morning. I don't know if they told you that. He was just part of our lives. And then, catastrophe. They decided to transfer him. Trauma. Really trauma. And the adults put together a little delegation and went to New York and said, please don't do this. We built this church for our children.
Yes.
They finally are settling down. They're bonding. They're forming a community. They've identified with this priest. You don't tell church hierarchy what to do.
Okay.
Father Bougoudas was transferred. And I remember being so worried about him. How was he going to get along without us? I mean, it was so close. Yes. He was out there all by himself, and the rest of us were in Newton. I didn't see him again for 40 years.
Wow.
We were having the 40th anniversary of the church, big party.
Yes.
And I knew that Father Bougoudas was going to be there. And my husband and I almost never went to the big banquets and the big festivities. But I said to him, I have to go to this one.
Of course, yes.
Because I want to see Father Bougoudas. And I told him many, many stories of the early years at St. Demetrius and our time with Father Bougoudas. We get to the dance. I spot Father Bougoudas somewhere or other, and I go up and I introduce myself. I said, I'm one of the original Goyans. And he very sheepishly reached into his pocket and pulled out a picture. And the picture was taken at his farewell dinner. We had given him a Paul Revere silver bowl, the Goyans. I don't know why. I can't imagine what use he had for it, but that was our gift to him. And I remember him saying, well, this matches their sterling characters.
Oh,
he was wonderful. He was wonderful. He pulled out this picture, and there were maybe 8 of us in the picture, 6, 8, not many. And he said, which one are you? So now it was my turn to sort of sheepishly reach into my pocketbook and get my reading glasses because I couldn't see a thing. And I said, that one, Father, in the white dress. In the meantime, while we're negotiating all this, my husband, who never talks that much and wasn't necessarily that social, is telling him all the stories that he had heard from me. It was a little embarrassing because it was like, I thought he was wonderful. That was the last time I saw him. I didn't start coming back to church in a very regular way until my husband died. And it was very, very hard. And whenever my life has become difficult, I go back to my Father's house. This is my Father's house. And so I came back to church.